Lady Barbrey is a woman who knows how to nurse a grievance. Be grateful for that. Barrowton is staunch for Bolton, largely because she still holds Ned Stark to blame for her husband's death. Staunch? All she does is spit on me. The day will come when I set her precious wooden town afire. Let her spit on that, see if it puts out the flames. Roose Bolton and Ramsay Bolton, A Dance with Dragons, Chapter 32, Reek 3. House Dustin of Barrowton is one of the most ancient noble houses of the North and one of the major families sworn to House Stark after they became kings in the North, located in Barrowton, with Barrowton itself one of the more prominent towns in the North, but when compared to towns of the South, would be considered very much a minor backwater town. It lies in the Barrowlands southwest of Winterfell, near the confluence of two rivers which flow into the Salt Spear. Barrowton is one of the most unique towns in Westeros due to its layout. It is centered around a large hill known as the Great Barrow, on which was built House Dustin's seat, Barrow Hall. The wooden town has wooden walls and broad, straight streets, including one grand one lined with elm trees. According to folklore and legend, the Great Barrow at the heart of the town contains the grave of the first king of the First Men, or some claim the king of the Giants. Makes the Kennet's Passage of the Dead mentions a curse that was supposedly placed on the Great Barrow, allowing none to rival the first king. The curse is said to have weakened and made corpse-like any living man who tried to claim the title, such as the Barrow Kings. Maesters doubt the legend, however. The castle, built on top of the Great Barrow, known as Barrow Hall, has a wooden wall and a square wooden towers. There is an old windmill and a grassy courtyard located near the gatehouse. Wide and wooden stairs lead up the hill to Barrow Hall's keep. While made of wood, its position on top of the steep Great Barrow makes it very hard to attack and much easier to defend. The current head of House Dustin is Lady Barbrey Dustin, though she is a Risewell by birth. Their arms portray two rusted long axes with black shafts crossed, a black crown between their points on yellow. The rusted crown on their arms derives from their claim of descent from the first king and the Barrow Kings that followed. If there is to be a battle here, many of your own will die as well. That's why we come. Winter's here. Time for us to go. No better way to die than a sword in hand. Sir Criston Cole and Roderick Dustin, Fire and Blood, The Dying of the Dragons. House Dustin's history, like most of the ancient houses of the North, is mostly made of legends and tales passed down through the generations. But what we can say for sure is House Dustin's claim of descent from the supposed first king of the First Men is certainly true. When the last Barrow King submitted to House Stark of Winterfell at the end of a 1,000-year war, the King of Winter took his daughter for wife, merging the lines of House Stark and Dustin. Barrowton has prospered under the Dustins, who have loyally ruled the Barrowlands for the Starks. This stability is likely why Barrowton managed to grow into a small town rather than a grouping of villages, which seems to be much more common in the North. When King Torrhen Stark bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror, so did House Dustin, becoming subjects to House Targaryen's rule, swearing loyalty to Aegon the Conqueror and House Stark as his new Wardens of the North, rather than the kings they had once been. During one of his royal progresses across the Seven Kingdoms, Aegon held court at Barrowton twice during his reign. The first named Dustin we have records of isn't even technically a Dustin. Dennis Snow, the bastard of Barrowton, joined Prince Aegon the Uncrowned in his hopeless fight against his usurping uncle, King Maegor the Cruel, who had taken the throne from him on the death of King Aenys I. Both Dennis Snow and the Uncrowned King perished in the battle beneath the God's Eye. It seems Barrowton is a favoured location for stops during royal progresses, given it's possibly the largest settlement in the north outside of White Harbour. When King Jaehaerys I and Queen Alysanne Targaryen visited Barrowton on their royal progress in the north during 58 AC, Lord Dustin showed them the inside of the Great Barrow, which is seen as a great honour, and further honoured them with a small tourney, not something that commonly happens in the north. Queen Alysanne also held one of her famous women's courts in the town. During the Great Council of 101 AC, amidst the succession crisis in the wake of King Jaehaerys' heir, Prince Balon's sudden death, House Dustin supported Princess Rhaenys Targaryen at the Great Council at Harrenhal, like several other of the Northern lords. When the Dance of the Dragons later broke out, and Lord Cregan Stark gathered the Northern Bannermen, the aged Lord Roderick Dustin led 2,000 Northern soldiers, known as the Winter Wolves, to fight for Rhaenyra Targaryen and her Blacks. Roderick was an old and hoary warrior, known as Roddy the Ruin. Despite his advanced age, he was still considered a savage combatant on the battlefield. He wore a shield, a helm, and a war horn in battle, which could often be heard above the other noises of combat. The Winter Wolves he led were mostly made up of third or fourth sons and old men who no longer wanted to burden their families as a harsh winter drew near, hoping for a death full of glory and honour. This aspect of the Winter Wolves gave them a much more ferocious battle style. As a result, Roderick led his Northmen to several victories against King Aegon II's Greens, most notably against the Westermen in the battle by the lakeshore and at the Butcher's Ball, where Lord Dustin led the charge. At the First Battle of Tumbleton, Roderick commanded the remnants of the Winter Wolves against the Hightower host. In the ensuing clash, he was mortally wounded by Sir Brendan Hightower, but succeeded in slaying both Brendan and Lord Ormond Hightower before he succumbed to his wounds. As predicted by the forming of the Winter Wolves, the coming winter was very harsh. In 133 AC, a winter fever descended upon Barrowton, killing hundreds. The following year, as the winter proved especially cruel, the new Lord Dustin closed his gates to hundreds of starving smallfolk, gathering outside the town's walls. House Dustin would once again fight for House Targaryen during the War of the Five Penny Kings in the Stepstones, against the last of the male Blackfyre line, Maelys Blackfyre. Sometime after this, Brandon Stark, the heir to Lord Rickard Stark, was fostered at Barrowton by the old Lord Dustin, though he spent much of his time instead in the Rills. Lord Roderick Ryswell sought to wed his daughter Barbrey to Brandon, but she ultimately went on to marry Lord Willem Dustin, the son of the Lord of Barrowton. Like many of the younger members of the northern houses, members of House Dustin were present at the now infamous tourney at Harrenhal in 281 AC. Young Lord Willem had been married to Barbrey Ryswell for less than half a year when Robert's rebellion began. Barbrey urged him to send one of his kin in his stead to lead his forces, but William insisted on personally leading the levies from Barrowton. Before his departure, Barbrey gave her husband a fine red stallion, the pride of her father, Lord Roderick Ryswell's herd. William vowed that he would return to her riding the same horse. Lord Willem attended the wedding of his liege lord, Eddard Stark, to Catelyn Tully at Riverrun, being one of the few northern lords present. During the traditional bedding ceremony, he made a bawdy remark praising Catelyn's figure to Eddard, in keeping with the custom of the feast. Willem was later one of the 6 companions who accompanied Lord Eddard to the Tower of Joy in the Red Mountains of Dawn, where Eddard sought his sister, the kidnapped Lyanna. They were opposed by 3 knights of the Kingsguard, with only Eddard Stark and the young Howland Reed surviving the ensuing battle. The fallen were buried beneath cairns raised from the tower's stone. When Eddard returned north, he brought Willem's horse back to Barbrey and told him that her husband had died an honourable death. While Lord Eddard returned Lord Willem's horse, he did not return his bones. Taking it as a slight, Lady Dustin held a grudge against the Starks and grew bitter with her overlords. Ned Stark returned the horse to me on his way back home to Winterfell. He told me that my lord husband died an honourable death, that his body had been laid to rest beneath the Red Mountains of Dawn. He brought his sister's bones back north though, and there she rests. But I promise you, Lord Eddard's bones will never rest beside hers. I mean to feed them to my dogs. Barbrey Dustin, to Theon Greyjoy. A Dance with Dragons, Chapter 41, The Turncloak. Lady Barbrey Dustin is described as being tall, unbent, and still seen as handsome despite her age. She has wrinkles around her mouth, dark eyes, and her hair evenly mixed with brown and grey, which she wears tied behind her head in a widow's knot, given her well-known status as a widow. Though thought to be intelligent, Barbrey has grown increasingly bitter over the years, since the death of her husband Willem at the Tower of Joy at the end of Robert's Rebellion. She deeply distrusts maesters, whom she disparagingly calls grey rats. She was very fond of her late nephew, Domric Bolton, whom was once heir to the Dreadfort, and harbours a deep hatred for Ramsay Snow, the bastard son of Lord Roose Bolton, whom she blames for Domric's death. She also bears a lasting grudge against Eddard Stark, given he did not bring her husband's bones back from Dorne, yet he did his sister Lyanna's. Lady Dustin dresses entirely in black, wearing no gold nor jewellery. Among her garments is a gown with a high, stiff collar and sleeves lined with velvet, as well as a sable cloak. Her personal banner flown over Barrow Hall quarters the spiked crown and crossed long axes of House Dustin with the golden horse head of her father, Lord Roderick Ryswell. Barbrey is the surviving daughter of Roderick Ryswell and is sister of Roger, Rickard and Ruse Ryswell. Another sister, Bethany, was the second wife of Lord Roose Bolton, Lord of the Dreadfort, before her death. Whilst Brandon Stark, the eldest son of Lord Rickard Stark of Winterfell, was fostered at Barrowton with the old Lord Dustin, he often rode through the rills, with the young Barbrey becoming infatuated with the heir to Winterfell, with there being a rumour the two had an affair, during which Brandon took her maidenhead. Lord Roderick hoped to wed his daughter to a Stark, but Lord Rickard instead betrothed Brandon to Catelyn Tully of Riverrun, a controversial move. Barbrey later claimed that Brandon did not wish to wed Catelyn, and that the match was arranged at the urging of Rickard's maester at Winterfell. Roderick then hoped to marry Barbrey to Brandon's younger brother Eddard, but this did not come to pass, with Barbrey instead marrying William Dustin. After the death of her lord husband in accordance with the widow's law set out during the reign of King Jaehaerys, Barbrey remained at Barrowton and rules the town in her own name. During the War of the Five Kings that came after the death of King Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark's arrest for supposed treason against the new king Joffrey Baratheon, Lady Barbrey sends minimal numbers of soldiers from Barrowton to join the army of Robb Stark, given her fractured relationship with Eddard. Robb would later be proclaimed king in the north, but is later killed during the Red Wedding. Lady Barbrey is one of the signatories of the letters that Ramsay Bolton sends announcing that Moat Cailin had been retaken from the Ironborn. She then hosts the Boltons at Barrowton, where the wedding of Ramsay to a supposed Arya Stark, who is actually Jane Paul, is set to occur. She cannot abide the presence of Ramsay and forbids him from Barrow Hall itself, as she suspects Ramsay had a hand in the death of her nephew, Domric Bolton. When Roose Bolton, the new Warden of the North, learns King Stannis Baratheon has left his garrison at the Wall, he decides to move Ramsay's wedding from Barrowton to Winterfell, a much more defendable castle. Barbrey insists on taking custody of this area until the wedding is set to occur. Theon Greyjoy, who travels in Lady Dustin's retinue to Winterfell, sits behind her at the wedding feast. Although Barbrey is astute and has good political savvy, she fails to see through the behaviour of Wyman Manderly, Lord of White Harbour, during the feast. She's offended by Wyman's apparent capitulation to the Boltons, despite his son Sir Wendell Manderly dying at the Red Wedding, and she dismisses Lord Manderly to Theon as a craven to the bone. Theon, though, suspects that Barbrey is well aware the bride is an impostor. Among the snowmen the squires build along the battlements of Winterfell, one of the snow ladies resembles Barbrey. Lady Dustin later has Theon lead her into the great crypts of Winterfell, where she explains much of her history and story to him, and how she resented Eddard for not bringing her husband's bones back to the north. As vengeance, Barbrey tells Theon that if Eddard's bones, which were heading north before Moat Cailin fell to the Ironborn, are discovered north of the neck, she will ensure they are never put to rest in the crypts, and she plans to feed them to her dogs. Barrowton is supposedly staunch for House Bolton, largely because of this grievance. Before leaving the crypts, Barbrey and Theon discover that swords are missing from the tombs, including the one of Brandon Stark, her lover from her youth. As tensions arise in the snowbound Winterfell, Barbrey and her brother Sir Roger Ryswell calm knights from House Manderly when Sir Hostine Frey insults Lord Wyman. When Barbrey requests a more cheerful song than the Winter Maid during the meal, Abel sings the Queen took off her sandal, the King took off his crown, and the Bear and the Maiden fair. While she appears to be loyal to House Bolton, Barbrey bears a grudge against House Frey due to the fact several of her own men were killed during the Red Wedding. She points this out to Sir Aenys Frey when several suspicious deaths occur in Winterfell. She's absent when the Manderleys and Freys clash, after the death of Little Walder, and when Theon escapes the castle.